Hello, friends. Welcome to Bible study in my basement. I'm Pastor Bill. I'm pastor of North Presbyterian Church in Williamsville, New York, and I'm providing a daily Bible study based on the daily lectionary readings through the PCUSA website. If you want to see those readings, you can go to that website and do a search for daily lectionary readings. It will take you to the readings for the today and for every day, really. So it's a very helpful website. Today we're beginning, of course, Holy Week. Yesterday was Palm Sunday, so the week between now and next Sunday, this coming Sunday, is considered for the church to be an important time of contemplation, time to focus our attention on the coming passion of Jesus. So all the readings sort of lead up to that event in Jesus' life. So this morning, what I thought I would look at is the reading from the Hebrew scripture and then the reading from the gospel. And those are difficult readings, and you'll see why when you hear them. But we'll begin with the passage from the Hebrew scriptures. This is from the book of Lamentation, chapter 1, beginning with verses 1 and 2, and then jumping to verses 6 through 12. How lonely sits the city that once was full of people. How like a widow she has become, she that was great among the nations, she that was a princess among the provinces has become a vassal. She weeps bitterly in the night with tears on her cheeks. Among all her lovers she has no one to comfort her. All her friends have dealt treacherously with her. They have become her enemies. From daughter Zion has departed all her majesty. Her princes have become like stags that find no pasture. They fled without strength before the pursuer. Jerusalem remembers, in the days of her affliction and wandering, all the precious things that were hers in days of old, when her people fell into the hand of the foe, and there was no one to help her. The foe looked on, mocking over her downfall. Jerusalem sinned grievously, so she has become a mockery. All who honored her despise her, for they have seen her nakedness. She herself groans and turns her face away. Her uncleanness was in her skirts. She took no thought of her future. Her downfall was appalling, with none to comfort her. O Lord, look at my affliction, for the enemy has triumphed. Enemies have stretched out their hands over all her precious things. She has even seen the nations invade her sanctuary, those whom you forbade to enter your congregation. All her people groan as they search for bread. They trade their treasure for food to revive their strength. Look, O Lord, and see how worthless I have become. Is it nothing to you, all who pass by? Look and see if there is any sorrow like my sorrow, which was brought upon me, which the Lord inflicted on the day of his fierce anger. So that's a pretty scathing passage. It begins the book of Lamentation, which is a reflection on the experience of the defeat of Judah, by Babylon. So it follows the book of Jeremiah in the Bible, and is some traditions have said that it was written by Jeremiah, but I don't think there's really any evidence to verify that, but it is certainly an expression of grief and sorrow and really just absolute uh, disbelief at what has happened to Jerusalem. Jerusalem, when it was sacked by Babylon, was pretty much fully destroyed, at least according to the description in the Hebrew Scriptures. The temple was destroyed. We know that, and was rebuilt um, some 70 years or so later. This occurred in around 586, I believe, BCE, that is before the Common Era. So about 600 years before the birth of Jesus. And it was really the turning point in Israel's life. Exile in Babylon really shaped the Jewish people, and in some ways sort of created Judaism as it became understood in Jesus' day. What happened during exile was the community there began, I think, to compile all their texts, their sacred stories, and began to create what has come now, what we understand now to be the Jewish Bible. So all these traditions were being brought together, and when they were released from exile by Babylon being overrun by Persia, those who returned, and they didn't all return, but those who did, brought this new set of scripture with them and used that as the foundation for their rebuilt society. So this left a deep, deep impression on the life of Israel, as any trauma does in any society. I mean, our country is still dealing with the effects of our own civil war. We're still certainly dealing with the effects of 9/11. Major traumatic events shape societies, and this one certainly did for Israel. You notice in it, on the one hand, there's this grief over what Jerusalem has gone through, how horrible for Jerusalem, but then also it sort of places the blame for what's happened on Jerusalem. Jerusalem sinned grievously, it says. One of the things that the prophets often do is to hold up a mirror. As I said, I think last week sometime, the prophets hold up a mirror to their society and give the society a way of interpreting their experience through that lens of God's expectations. And this passage says that Jerusalem failed. And so God allowed Jerusalem to fall. And one of the main sort of problems that the people of Israel had to contend with in exile was the belief among some, I'm sure, and the assumption that God had abandoned them, or that God was too weak to defeat the gods of the other, of the Babylonian Empire. How do you maintain a sense of connection to God when it feels as if you are on your own? And that is that's a question we all have to deal with. We all live with that with that conundrum in our lives, because there are certainly always going to be times when it feels as if life has turned against us. Now, some might think that that's how we should be interpreting what's happening now with the coronavirus. Is this some kind of punishment from God? I don't buy that. I don't personally believe in that kind of thing. But how we respond to this reality is a reflection of our values, and it does in some way, expose our commitments. Pardon me, I'm just trying to turn off my phone. Our continuing emphasis on the need to produce and to consume and to interact so that the economy is preserved in this context is dangerous. And so we have to shift our values, and our inability to do that, I think, does in some way reflect on our whole system of values in this country. That's not God's doing. That is the result of generations of emphasis on the need for economic growth over community health. So we have to contend with those problems in our society, and has now come into stark relief for us. But that's not a punishment. That's just a consequence of our misplaced values. So it could lead to changes, one hopes. And for Israel, that experience of exile led to immense changes in their society. It was a trauma that they were able to use as a means of growth, and to help sort of redefine who they were and what was really important. So perhaps we will experience that as well. Trauma has a way of helping us to do that if we are open to who we are, and admitting and being honest about that, and open to the possibility of change, of a world that can emerge that's new. So Lamentations, that's what we will hear from this week in the daily readings. I don't know if I will go over the Lamentations every day, but this is part of the Holy Week experience, because Holy Week is a time that is meant to provide us an opportunity to re-examine who we are, It's not just a matter of concentrating on Jesus' experience, but also our experience of um, life in Jesus' presence. How do we, and the things that we do, um, how do we reflect the love and the compassion and um, the sense of sacrifice that Jesus embodies? And with that, let's look at the gospel reading, because the gospel reading today is really kind of puzzling, but worth, I think, paying attention to. So this is the Gospel of Mark, chapter 11, beginning with verse 12. On the following day, when they came from Bethany, he was hungry. Seeing in the distance a fig tree in leaf, he went to see whether perhaps he would find anything on it. When he came to it, he found nothing but leaves, for it was not the season for figs. He said to it, "May no one ever eat fruit from you again." And his disciples heard it. Then they came to Jerusalem, and he entered the temple and began to drive out those who were selling and those who were buying in the temple. And he overturned the tables of the money changers and the seats of those who sold doves, and he would not allow anyone to carry anything through the temple. He was teaching and saying, "Is it not written, 'My house shall be called a house of prayer for all the nations'? But you have made it a den of robbers." And when the chief priests and the scribes heard it, they kept looking for a way to kill him, for they were afraid of him, because the whole crowd was spellbound by his teaching. And when evening came, Jesus and his disciples went out of the city. In the morning, as they passed by, they saw the fig tree withered away to its roots. Then Peter remembered and said to him, "Rabbi, look, the fig tree that you cursed has withered." Jesus answered them, "Have faith in God. Truly I tell you, if you say to this mountain, 'Be taken up and thrown into the sea,' and if you do not doubt in your heart, but believe that what you say will come to pass, it will be done for you. So I tell you, whatever you ask for in prayer, believe that you have received it, and it will be yours. Whenever you stand praying, forgive, if you have anything against anyone, so that your Father in heaven may also forgive you your trespasses." So that's kind of a puzzling passage, really. This is occurring the day after Jesus' entrance into Jerusalem, riding on a donkey, and so all of that fanfare has occurred. And in Mark's gospel, Jesus goes into Jerusalem, goes into the temple, looks around, and it's getting late, so he leaves and goes back to Bethany, which is nearby, which is near Jerusalem. So they go back into Jerusalem. This is a time, of course, it's during the Passover preparations. Passover is on its way that week. And so a lot of people are coming into Jerusalem. There's a lot of activity. And Jesus is leading his disciples into the city to take part in all of that. This this encounter with the fig tree is just very odd, and there are a lot of theories about that, and of course, early commentators, from the early centuries, the church fathers often would use allegory to explain scripture, especially something like that. And so the fig tree represents something, and what happens to it is representative of either the fig tree is the people, or is Judaism, or whatever it is. It's just a very strange passage in my mind, and I'm not going to speculate what exactly it's trying to to reveal about Jesus. One thing that Mark, the writer, may have had in mind was this idea that Jesus continues to have authority over the natural world. We saw that when he stills the storm, or even with the loaves and fishes. Jesus has this authority that he can exert whenever it seems appropriate. It seems to me a little extreme to cause a tree to wither and die because it doesn't produce something that you're after. But what are you going to do? So they come into Jerusalem, though, and this famous scene where Jesus clears out the money changers. This is a powerful event in Jesus' life, and all four Gospels, which is unusual for all four Gospels to have to recount an event in Jesus' life, but all four do have this scene. All of the three synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, all have this scene occurring after his triumphal entrance, after the Jesus entrance into Jerusalem. John's Gospel has this occurring the first time Jesus enters Jerusalem, but not at the Jesus in John's Gospel. Jesus goes to Jerusalem 3 times, and the first time is when Jesus does this. So it's one of the earliest things that Jesus does. That's probably very unlikely for a timeline. The chances are, according to many scholars, that once Jesus did this, he would probably have been arrested. This probably was, historically, would have been the moment when Jesus' passion would have begun. Because that kind of disruption would have really caught the attention of the Romans. It says he in Mark's Gospel, he prevented people from moving through the temple court. So it wasn't just that he went in and made caused a commotion. He actually went in and occupied the place. And that's important. This image that Jesus isn't just going in to disrupt things; he's going in to claim things, and that's part of Mark's concern, or Mark's, I think, his emphasis is, what Jesus is doing is establishing himself, and perhaps that's part of that authority that he exerts on the fig tree too. He is revealing his status in a way that was really very unexpected, and for the people around him must have been pretty frightening. Then this piece about prayer, of course, is hyperbole, I think, but the importance in Mark's Gospel that people remain connected to God regardless of what is happening around them. You have to be willing to remain committed. And that is, I think, a central concern for the writer of Mark's Gospel. I think he is writing to a community that is under a lot of stress, and people are perhaps even falling away because being Christian does not have the kinds of benefits that they had hoped, or it puts them in too much conflict with their society. Now, this would not have been a time when Christians were being, openly persecuted by the government or anything like that, but it may have put them in a position of being sort of ostracized by their communities. And the writer of Mark is saying, look, we've got to hang in there. you've got to continue to remain committed to this path. And that's the only way to experience the full presence of God in your life and in the world. So there's a challenge embedded in this passage, not just for the disciples around Jesus, but for every disciple. We have to continue to trust, even when things around us seem to be falling apart. And that's part of the Lamentations message as well. That the people are able to continue to be in relationship to God in spite of what they've gone through is really the challenge for their faith. And it remains a challenge for us. There are people today, I'm sure, who are wondering, where is God in the midst of all of this? And my answer to that is God is all around us. God is in the relationships we continue to maintain, and in the relationships that keep us connected to one another, even though we're not able physically to be together. So it's a challenge, and in the face of that challenge, we will perhaps learn the true strength of our faith and what it really means for us. So it's during this time, and it's coincidental. It's happening during Lent and Holy Week, but some of the challenges of our faith are coming into sharper relief in light of our experience today. So we continue to struggle, to walk with Jesus, and to hang on to our sense of connection to God and to one another. So I'll leave it at that, and I encourage you to continue to contemplate Jesus' passion and what that means for you in light of your experience, and encourage you to continue to find ways of reaching out to one another and conveying a sense of God's presence in spite of all that's happening around us. So I look forward to being with you again tomorrow, and do continue to keep the faith and pray without ceasing, knowing that God is with you.